Welcome to this week's virtual Drasha. This week we have the incredible privilege to read Parshas Savo, and the parsha begins with the mitzvah of Bikurim, the mitzvah of the first fruit. Farmer plants his first fruit. Remember, the mitzvah of Bikurim, of first fruit, only applies to the Shivas Haminim, the 7 unique species to Eretz Yisrael. And as soon as those first fruit come, the Rashi tells us the farmer comes, ties a little red string around the pomegranate, around the date, all the rest of the 7 species, and brings it up to the Beis Hamikdash, to the Kohen. On a most basic level, the mitzvah of Bikurim is a fundamental display of emunah, of belief. Think about this. The farmer just spent all of these months planting, plowing, tilling, watering, irrigating, davening. Oh, finally, there are the literal fruits of his labor. You would think the farmer would be able to sit back, enjoy the fruits of the labor. Well, what does he do with the first fruits? He brings them to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in an ultimate display of emunah, of belief, in recognizing that it is not simply my efforts, the farmer's efforts, that brings the fruit out of the ground, but rather it is the hashkachas habor, it is the divine providence. So therefore I give back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not the pshat that I'm giving God a gift. I'm giving God that which is rightfully His, and solidifying my belief system that everything I have, even though I have to work hard, I have to put in my hishtadlos, but my effort is meaningless unless the Ribono Shel Olam blesses those efforts with success. Bikurim highlight the centrality of the involvement of Hashem in anything and everything. Nothing comes to literal fruition unless, of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu blesses those efforts. Unless, of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants there to be success. But the Torah records an interesting detail. Right, so the farmer brings up his first fruit, and the Torah says, this is the beginning of the parasha, Perek Chavav Pasuk Beis, chapter 26, verse 2. The Torah says, you shall take the first fruit, you'll go ahead and V'samta batena, you'll put that fruit in the basket. You'll go to the place which God has chosen to, in which God has chosen to rest His name. You'll put the fruit in the basket, and you'll go up to the Beis Hamikdash. And I think there's a simple question: why does the Torah have to tell us that you put the fruit in the basket? In other words, I understand I need to move the fruit, the first fruits, I need to move the Bikurim from point A to point B. Point A being my home, point B, or my field, point B being the Beis Hamikdash. I got it. And in order to transport it, what do I have to do? I have to go ahead and I have to put it. So what does it matter? A basket, a 7-mile market bag, a Ziploc, a saddle bag under my hat. Who cares how I transport it? The issue just is that I get it from point A to point B. So, of course, on a basic level, the Mishnayos Maseches Bikurim tell us that the basket in which you bring the Bikurim, which you bring the fruit, is in and of itself part of the gift to the Kohen, part of the gift to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Gemara records that the rich people would make baskets out of gold and silver, the poor people would make baskets out of wicker, but the basket itself is part of Bikurim. So perhaps on a basic level, that's what the Torah mentions, the basket. It's part of the Bikurim process, just like the fruit is. But perhaps there is a deeper life message in this as well, the message of the basket. I'll give you a simple mashal. You ever go to the supermarket and your intention is only to go into the supermarket for two things? Okay, so what happens? You know how this works. You walk into the supermarket. There's the carts are arranged there. You look at the carts. You glance at the carts. You say, "Nah, I don't need it because I'm only here for two things." So you go in. You get your two things. So one of two scenarios often happens. Either you remember, I also need this and this and this, or perhaps, depending on if it's the husband or the wife or parent or child, you get a phone call. Oh, you're in the supermarket. Can you also pick up this, this, and this? And in that moment, something very interesting happens, which is you almost have to make like a calculated decision. So right now, I've got those two items. Now I have to, I'm fine. I don't need a cart. I have two hands, Baruch Hashem. Good. So now I have to get items 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 also. And I make the calculated decision. Do I go back and get a cart? Or maybe I I got this, I'll go like this, I'll tuck something here, I'll tuck something there, crane my neck a little bit, I'll put it in there. I think I could handle this. I think I'm going to be okay. Or you go back for the cart. So we know how this story ends. If you choose not to go back to the cart because you think you could handle it, more often than not, you realize you can't handle it. You end up dropping something. Because what does the cart represent? See, whoever knew that there was so much metaphorical meaning to a shopping cart? The cart represents a seder, represents order. Because interestingly enough, in a shopping cart, there's a lot of chachma. What's the chachma? There are certain things you can put on the bottom of the cart, certain things you have to put on the top of the cart. I always find it interesting. This just as an aside. It's always fascinating, I think, that when you walk into most supermarkets, the produce section is often right there in the front. Yet, in terms of cart logistics 101, you can't put grapes in the bottom of the cart, right? You often don't want to put your produce on the bottom. It's just as an aside, something interesting to think about. Why do they put the produce section on the front if at the end of the day it can't go in the bottom of the cart? So you have to, right? So you get your grapes, and then you go ahead and you get a bunch of other stuff, or you get your chips and you get your soda, and you recognize you can't put the bottles on top of the bags. So it's not just about throwing stuff into a cart, right? The cart represents the framework. But then at the end of the day, you need chachma about how to arrange your cart. And anyone who hasn't arranged the cart with chachma knows you get to the checkout line, and unfortunately, let's say arenu harav, this one's thing is crushed, this thing busted open, this thing is not. So you have to arrange. The cart represents a framework, but the framework has to be structured b'chachma. And you see in life, there's the people who try to wing it just by holding on to everything, and there's the people who get the cart. So perhaps this is the symbolism of the basket as well. The basket is the shopping cart. Can you carry your bikurim to the Beis HaMikdash? It could be you can, unless you have a very small field, not a lot of fruit, no problems. I could wing it. I could go ahead and carry it like this. I have a short walk. It's not a big deal. But the problem is Hakadosh Baruch Hu says, I want you to use a basket. Because a basket represents a framework. Right? When you go ahead and you put your fruit in the basket, you have to use chachma. Remember again, think about what are the shivas aminim. You've got pomegranates, you've got dates, you've got grapes, you have olives. You can't put the olives and the grapes underneath the pomegranates because they're going to crush them. So you probably have to put the pomegranates on the bottom. Then probably after that, the dates. Then probably after that, I don't know which would go for on the bottom, olives or grapes, but you'd have to figure that out. The basket represents a framework. And in the framework works when you arrange the various levels with chachma. And perhaps HaKadosh Baruch Hu is teaching us as follows. If you want to get from point A to point B in life, you need a basket. If you want to get from where you are to your finish line, you want to get from where you are to the actualization of your goals, you need a basket. You need a framework, and you need a plan. Because if you don't have a framework and a plan for how to get from point A to point B, you know what happens? You start moving, you drop this, you forget this, I have to go back for that, this cracked, this I'm juggling, this I'm uncomfortable because I'm holding it like this, and often you don't get to point B. Without a plan, it's very difficult to move forward in life. Perhaps this is the symbolism, and this is the message of why Kadosh Baruch Hu goes out of his way to tell us, V'samta batena, v'lakachta mereishis kol peri ha'adama. What's bikurim? Bikurim represents potential, right? It's the first fruit. My field, the Mirat Hashem, is going to go ahead and create so much beauty. My personalistic field is capable of going ahead and producing so much beauty. Kadosh Baruch Hu says, take your first fruit, take your kochos, take your potential, and use your potential, use your first fruit to get from where you are to your Beis HaMikdash, to get from point A to point B, to get from the starting line to the finishing line. But how do you do that? You have to put your bikurim, you have to put your potential, you have to put your abilities, v'samta batena. You have to put it in a basket. You have to put it in a framework. You have to create a plan that allows for the actualization of success. I think when we think about the times in which we've been unsuccessful in life, if we think about the times when we started out doing something, but it just didn't materialize, I often find this, just ask myself, why wasn't I successful? Why didn't I accomplish the thing I wanted to accomplish? And often there's a variety of different reasons. Sometimes it wasn't the right thing to accomplish. Sometimes something totally outside of me occurred. But I think very often, the reason I don't accomplish the things I wanted to accomplish is because I didn't have a real plan. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to get from A to B, from point A to point B, from my house to the Beis Hamikdash, from the start line to the finish line, but I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a plan. And without a plan, without a framework, without a basket, without a shopping cart, you end up trying to juggle a whole bunch of different things, and more often than not, you drop something. And once you drop something, you usually become so frustrated that often you forget even where you were going, what you were doing, or where you were headed. Kadosh Baruch Hu tells us, each of us has bikurim. Each of us has this first fruit. We have only begun to discover our potential, only begun to discover our abilities. The first fruits are the inclinations, the beginnings of what we begin to see. I have koach. I have power, I have ability, I have gifts, I have strengths. And so now that I begin to see those things, I want to accomplish things in life. I don't want to settle for mediocrity. I don't want to stay here in the field. I want to grow, I want to move. I want to get from point A to point B, from my house to the Beis Hamikdash, from start line to finish line. I want to move. Kadosh Baruch Hu says, fantastic. I want you to move as well. But you need a plan. It's Chodesh Elul. And during this month, we often tend to think that the only avoda of this month is kind of thinking about the things we've done wrong. Now, there's no question the process of tshuva absolutely begins, way before Chodesh Elul as well. The process of tshuva applies throughout the entire year. But there's no question that in the month of Elul, we're in a more introspective space. And often we begin to look kind of at what we've done or what we haven't done. But I also think that part of the avoda of Chodesh Elul is a twofold avoda. Number one, to recognize what are the things I wanted to accomplish but didn't accomplish. Why didn't I accomplish them? And often it's because I didn't have a basket, I didn't have a plan. Chodesh Elul is also about me looking forward. In the coming year, what do I want to accomplish? Who do I want to be? What do I want to become? Having goals, aspirations, dreams is beautiful, but they're meaningless unless I have a plan to actualize them. Chodesh Elul is the time when we craft our basket. Chodesh Elul is the time where I say to myself, I am tired of juggling things at the supermarket. I'm getting a cart. And I'm going to go ahead and create a seder, and create an order, and create a framework of accomplishment. I'm making a plan for myself because I know I have bikurim. I know there are things I want to accomplish. I know that I want to grow and I want to move. Chodesh Elul is the time when we structure our life plan to get from our field to our Beis Hamikdash, to get from the starting line to the finish line. The Samta Batene is HaKadosh Baruch Hu whispering in our ear, make your plan and accomplish great things. Wishing everyone a good and Erev Shabbos and a beautiful Shabbos Kodesh.